Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second BESTPRAC and EARMA virtual meeting. I'm Johanna Roth, EARMA's events officer, and I think I can speak for everyone at BESTPRAC and EARMA when I say we are excited to have 735 registrations at this point for this event. So let's see who will join us at what point today or tomorrow morning. Right now, I can see we have just over 200 people already here. So good morning, and thank you for being here. For the first hour, we will be in this webinar, and you'll hear from André Charalambos, Nick Claassen, and then our first speaker, Alea Lopez. We will then break into our working groups, and you've already received the links for the different Zoom meetings for that. After the working groups, we will come back here at about 11:35, and then Edwin Kantas will end the meeting for today for us all. And then everyone who would like to stay can still stay for some networking on Spatial Chat. So it would be great to have you there as well. Please note that all plenary sessions are recorded and all working groups as well. So if you do put your video on in the working groups at any point to ask a question or anything, please know that you might be in the recording. Then it's also important to know that we already started a little bit on the chat here, that you can use the chat to introduce yourself, to make any comments. And then we have the Q&A function where you can ask any questions, and we will try our best to answer them in the time that we have. With this, I would like to hand over to start the meeting to my co-organizer, André Charalambos, who is a project officer at the Climate and Atmosphere Research Center of the Cyprus Institute, and who is the former vice chair and grant holder of COST BESTPRAC. So welcome, André, and yeah, let's go.
Sorry, Joanna. Thank you. I will try to share my presentation first. Okay. Good morning, dear participants, and welcome from me as well to our second BESTPRAC EARMA meeting. Today, I have the pleasure to guide you through the plenary session and moderate the Q&A section. Before starting, though, I want to sincerely thank the EARMA team, Neil, Emma, Nick, and especially Joanna, for her help and support for the best organization of this event, as well as my BESTPRAC colleagues, Maria, Christina, Maya, and Edwin, for being the moderators of our parallel working group meetings. So let's start with a very short presentation from my end to explain you briefly of what is BESTPRAC and our efforts to keep our BESTPRAC community live since the end of our cost action. I guess most of you know that BESTPRAC is a cost-targeted network that started in 2014 to allow networking and exchanging financial, legal, and administrative experience to share and develop best practices, encouraging knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, and increased efficiency in project management, and hence establish a network for the administrative, finance, and legal services in universities, research organizations, and related entities. It has three main working groups. Working Group 1, administration, dealing with the overall management of externally funded projects. Working Group 2, finance, dealing with the financial aspects of preparing and running cross-European projects. And Working Group 3, legal, dealing with the legal framework of the projects. In my next slide, allow me to show you a very short video to explain what is BESTPRAC. The video has no sound, it's just a short video showing what is BESTPRAC. Oops, sorry. Since our last meeting in Brussels in September 2019, we made an agreement with the EARMA for the organization of joint meetings and events for RMAs. This is our second, we had one meeting last November, and this is our second one. Additionally, with the BESTPRAC core group and other RMA colleagues, we have submitted a new action proposal. And now together with EARMA, we are cooperating for writing a proposal on the New Horizon Europe call for RMAs. You can find BESTPRAC in Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can also join our discussion groups on LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank you for your attention. And now I would like to give the floor to Nick Klassen, EARMA's Managing Director, for his own welcome address. Nick, the floor is yours.
Hello, super. Thank you, Andre. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Klassen. I'm the Managing Director of EARMA. EARMA is, of course, the European Association of Research Managers and Administrators. We're pretty much the same community, or about the same community as BESTPRAC. A lot of EARMA members and BESTPRAC members obviously overlap. And throughout the years, we have been, a lot of people from both sides have been active within both organizations. EARMA was also at the conception of the initial project of COST BESTPRAC. I want to say a few things today. First off, I see also in the chat people saying, okay, this was pre-COVID times, this video, and indeed, and I think one of the big values that BESTPRAC has always had, and also for EARMA that was very much the case, is that we were looking at best practice exchange, at sharing our views in person, and really building a network from that in-person collaboration. Well, now, of course, it's much more difficult, and maybe I think in the end it will also be a benefit that we have been able to explore this, that we are doing these meetings now here online. And actually, it was not the idea to be doing these meetings online initially. We were looking to have in-person meetings where EARMA and BESTPRAC would collaborate, but obviously with the pandemic situation, we had to do it online. We have very much in mind, at least from our side, and I'm quite sure also from the BESTPRAC core group, that we will have these meetings once it's possible. The situation seems to be somewhat clearing up in Europe, at least, and I hope in the world. So I hope we can go back to in-person meetings in 2022. But I think it will be important going forward to be as inclusive as possible. Not everybody can come to every meeting. Not everybody can always, or maybe will want to join a physical meeting in the beginning. So we'll have the two pillars. We'll have the online and the in-person aspect. So really looking forward to that happening again, as I am sure many of you are. We've been really happy. I thank Andre also for thanking us for the collaboration. We thank very much the BESTPRAC core group, all of the speakers involved over the next 2 days and of the last event and of future events, to be taking on this important task of furthering the knowledge, the profession of research managers and administrators, of people who are supporting research in some sort of way. That's really what I want to convey to you today. We are, in a sense, a bit in a holding pattern, but also in exploring the online world and this online collaboration between BESTPRAC and EARMA. And I very, very much look forward to exploring also, again, the in-person aspects of the BESTPRAC EARMA collaboration. Look forward to meeting you in person. But with having that said, we've got a great program coming up, a number of breakout possibilities or breakout parallel sessions. So I would love to see that. I hope you're also ready for these two partial days of all of that. And I give the floor back to Andre, and I welcome you as warmly as I can. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. And without any further delay, I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker for the day, Alia Lopez de San Roma Gonzalez. Is a policy officer at the European Commission's Directorate for Research and Innovation in the Open Science unit, where she contributes to the development and implementation of the EU policy on open access to scientific results with focus on legal matters. Her areas of interest, work, and expertise include EU research policy, copyright, and open science. Alia will present the Open Science requirements for Horizon Europe beneficiaries, the main novelties with regards to Horizon 2020, and recent developments in the European Commission's policy on open science. Alia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andy, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here in the second BESTPRAC and EARMA online meeting. Thank you very much to Andri, to Edwin, to Nick, and to Johanna for this very good organization and for the invitation to be here today. And it's my pleasure to be here with research managers and administrators, because we all know the key role you play in helping us develop and implementing our policy. So I'm very glad to present what we have for Horizon Europe in the realm of open science. I'm going to share now the slides. So why do we need open science? Open science is defined in the Horizon Europe regulation and in the Model Grant Agreement as a means or an approach to the scientific process based on open cooperative work, tools, and diffusing knowledge. And why is it important to have open science? Because it has the potential to increase the quality and the efficiency of research and innovation if all the produced results are shared, made reusable, and if the reproducibility is improved. It has also the potential to increase creativity through collective intelligence and cross-disciplinary research that does not require laborious data wrangling. And it has the potential to increase trust in the science system by engaging both researchers and citizens. And we all know how important this is to increase trust in science in these times. So we have done a great effort in Horizon Europe, in the preparation of Horizon Europe, to mainstream open science across the project lifetime, starting from the proposal submission, where open science is taken into account in the evaluation of proposals, in the project phase with the implementation and the description of the action, and in the monitoring and reporting during and at the end of the project. So here is one slide just to present very briefly the evolution. So open science started with open access to publications in FP7 with a pilot on open access to publications. And open access is still at the very core of open science, but now this policy is much broader than open access to publications. So we started with a pilot on open access to publications. Then we had open access to publications made mandatory and a pilot on open research data and data management plans. That continue evolving, and now in Horizon Europe, open science is embedded across Horizon Europe, across the framework program. As I mentioned before, in the evaluation of proposals, via the grant agreement, the obligations, the requirements we have in there, the work programs, also some obligations via work programs and calls, the guidelines that we provide for proposers, and the reporting. So the aim is to strengthen open access obligations and to focus on responsible research data management in line with the FAIR principles. I will cover those principles afterwards. Those refers to findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So with regard to research data, there has been an evolution. And now the focus is no longer on open access to research data, even if we always had some exceptions to this openness of research data, but the focus is on responsible research data management, which is much broader and which includes also, as part of this broader concept, also open access to research data, unless exceptions apply. So what are open science practices? This is a non-exhaustive list that you can find in the template for proposals. And we have some of them, for example, the early and open sharing of research via pre-registration, register of reports, preprints. This open science practice, for example, is recommended. What do we mean by recommended? That is not an obligation per the Model Grant Agreement or per a work program or a call. It could become mandatory in the future, for example, via a work program. Research output management, data management plans, the research management, the management of research data. This is mandatory via the provisions we have in the Model Grant Agreement. Measures to ensure reproducibility of research outputs, to provide information on the tools that are needed to validate the conclusions of publications and to validate or reuse data. This is mandatory because it's a provision that is set in the Model Grant Agreement. Open access to research outputs through the position and providing open access via trusted repositories. Here we have open access to publications. I will later elaborate on this one. It's mandatory for peer review publications. Open access to data is mandatory with exceptions, and open access to software, models, algorithms, workflows, which are recommended. Another open science practice is participation in open peer review. This is recommended, and involving all relevant knowledge actors is another open science practice, which is also recommended. So I insist again, this is a non-exhaustive list. There can be many other open science practices, and there are some mandatory and some recommended. So what is the evaluation of proposals and open science? Open science is evaluated under the excellence criterion, under methodology, and under quality and efficiency of implementation criterion, with the capacity of participants and consortium as a whole and a list of achievements. So if we take the excellence criterion, evaluation of the quality of open science practices takes place under this criterion, and proposals will have to provide up to 1 page to describe open science practices and up to 1 page to describe research data and research output management. So research data, how data generated in the action will be managed, and research output, software models, will be adequately managed. Under the criterion quality and efficiency of implementation, they will have to explain the expertise on open science and provide a list of publications, software, data relevant to the project with qualitative assessment and, where available, persistent identifiers. And very importantly, publications are expected to be open access. So in that list of publications, the publications which are listed are expected to be open access. What happens if, for example, a researcher says, but at that time I didn't provide open access to that publication and I would like to include that in the list of achievements? So we encourage them to deposit that publication in a repository and to provide open access via that repository to the publication. Data sets are expected to be fair, as I mentioned before, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and as open as possible, as closed as necessary. This is the principle that we use to say we would like to see it open by default, research data, unless it's not possible, because there are exceptions that apply. I will cover them afterwards. And very importantly, again here, the significance of publications is to be evaluated on the basis of the proposer's qualitative assessment and not per the journal impact factor. So the Commission is strongly supporting the change in the research assessment system towards a system which does not only take into account a journal impact factor as a proxy for the excellence of research. We consider that it should be evaluated research on its intrinsic merit. And this is a way of doing a little bit what we're preaching by ourselves as a funder, taking into account the significance of publications on the basis of the qualitative assessment of that publication. So this is, but I would say the inclusion of open science under the excellence criterion, not evaluating per the journal impact factor, publications expected to be open access, are a good way forward in our role as a funder and how we integrate open science in the evaluation and the research assessment with the means that we have at our disposal. So in the way we evaluate the research that we will fund. Nota bene on evaluation. Evaluation concerns mandatory and recommended open science practices, the latter where appropriate. When open science practices are duly justified as not appropriate for the project, a score will not be lowered for not addressing those practices or for a lack of open science expertise, but they must be duly justified that they are not appropriate for the project. And all work programs, except for the ERC, evaluate open science practices as outlined in the slide that I presented before, with the exception of some EIC programs that for now evaluate under impact, but we expect that to change. So all open science practices are part of the evaluation, not only those that are mandatory, but also those that are recommended. And all open science practices which are not mandatory are recommended, not only those that I covered in the previous slide, so all of them. So let's now see what are the requirements, what are the obligations with regard to open science. And we can say that we have three pillars. We have open access to scientific publications, we have research data management, and additional open science practices. With regard to open access to publications, beneficiaries must ensure open access to peer-reviewed scientific publications relating to the results. How? In particular, they must ensure that at the latest upon publication, the position of the author-accepted manuscript, that is the version that has gone through peer review and is accepted for publication, but before the layout, let's say, of the publisher, so the author-accepted manuscript, or the version of record, that is the publisher's version, the published version, in a trusted repository. We have a definition of trusted repository in the annotated model grant agreement. And to provide immediate open access via the repository under a CC BY, a Creative Commons Attribution license, which allows for wide reuse or equivalent. And we allow Creative Commons Attribution non-commercial and non-derivative licenses or equivalent for long text formats, for example, books. So it's very important here that in Horizon Europe, there are no longer embargo periods for publications as we had for Horizon 2020, 6 or 12 months. We ask to provide immediate open access. This open access has to be provided via the repository, no matter where our beneficiaries decide to publish. Take, for example, the case in which a beneficiary is saying, but I've already published in an open access venue. Why do I need to provide open access via the repository? Because we require so. We believe in the importance of repositories and for long preservation, because it empowers also the research community, research institutions. So we require immediate open access via the repository and under open licenses to allow for reuse of those publications. Beneficiaries will also have to ensure information via the repository about any research output, tool, or instrument which is needed to validate the conclusions of the scientific publications. So in Horizon Europe, we are paying particular attention to the reproducibility of results, to the validation of results. So information has to be provided so that people can validate the conclusions of that scientific publication. And metadata must be open under a Creative Commons public domain dedication or equivalent, in line with the FAIR principles, and provide information, amongst others, about the licensing terms and persistent identifiers. With regard to publications, another very important provision that we have now in Horizon Europe is that we request that beneficiaries or authors, because it depends on the legislation at the national level, must retain sufficient intellectual property rights to comply with the open access requirements. In some countries, it will be the institution, the copyright owner, or in some countries, it will be the author. But they must retain enough IPR to comply with the open access obligations. Why? Because unfortunately, we see that in academia, it is very often the case in which researchers assign their copyright to publishers. And then it's in the hands of publishers to determine the conditions for dissemination of these scientific publications, even when this research on which the publications are resulting are publicly funded. So we want beneficiaries and authors to keep their copyright to ensure compliance with the open access requirements. So they can no longer say, no, I give away my rights to publishers, so I'm no longer able to provide immediate open access under an open license. No, you must keep enough IPR to ensure that you can comply with your obligations. And beneficiaries can decide where they want to publish, in which journal, in which platform, but publication fees are reimbursable only if publishing venues or the venue is full open access. What do we mean by full? That we are not reimbursing publication fees in hybrid venues. Hybrid venues are those in which some part of the content is only accessible to subscribers, and some content is openly accessible to all. So our beneficiaries can publish wherever they want, no limitation in that sense, but we are only going to reimburse those publication fees in which all content is openly accessible to everyone. And beneficiaries have also the possibility to publish at no cost for them in Open Research Europe. I will present Open Research Europe at the end of the presentation, but it's the European Commission Open Access Publishing Platform. So those are the obligations with regard to publications. Now, with regard to research data management, as I mentioned before, we are changing and broadening the concept from the focus on open access to research data to research data management. Beneficiaries must manage the digital research data generated in the action responsibly, in line with the FAIR principles, and they must establish and regularly update a DMP, a data management plan, for generated and or collected data. So it's for generated data, but in the template that we put at the disposal in the web page of the European Commission, we also include collected data, and we encourage collected data also to be included in there. And as soon as possible, and within the deadline set out in this data management plan, they must deposit the data in a trusted repository. In some call conditions, it will be required that this repository is federated in the European Open Science Cloud, and ensure open access under CC BY, the Creative Commons Attribution License, a Creative Commons Public Domain Dedication, or equivalent, following the principle as open as possible, as closed as necessary. This is the principle that we have had from the very beginning with regard to open access to research data, and which states that exceptions are allowed for the openness of research data. And they will also have to provide information via the repository about any research output, tool, and instrument needed to reuse or validate the data. So this is, let's say, a parallel provision to the one we have for publications to facilitate, to ensure reuse and validation of the results. Metadata of research data must be open under a public domain dedication or equivalent, but here, to the extent legitimate interest or constraints are safeguarded. This is the reference with regard to the provision on metadata for publications. Metadata for publications has to be open access, but metadata for research data is to the extent legitimate interest or constraints are safeguarded, in line with the FAIR principles, and provide information about the licensing terms and persistent identifiers, amongst others. As I mentioned before, within the principle as open as possible, as close as necessary, we understand and we provide for exceptions which are possible. So data may be kept closed if providing open access is against the beneficiary's legitimate interest, including regarding commercial exploitation, or if it is contrary to any other constraints. Openness to research data is contrary to any other constraints, such as data protection rules, privacy, confidentiality, trade secrets, the union competitive interest security rules, IPRs, intellectual property rights, or if it could be against other obligations under the grant agreement. So now we've covered the provisions in Horizon Europe in the Model Grant Agreement for open access to publications and for the research data management. Now I'm going to present the provisions for additional open science practices, which are also part of the Model Grant Agreement. We have the first provision, that is where the call conditions impose additional obligations regarding open science practices. The beneficiaries must also comply with those. So this will be determined at the level of the call condition. A second set of obligations with regard to additional open science practices, additional because those are beyond open access to publications and research data management, where the call conditions impose additional obligations regarding the validation of scientific publications. The beneficiaries must provide digital or physical access to data or other results which are needed for validation of the conclusions of scientific publications, to the extent that their legitimate interest or constraints are safeguarded. and unless they already provided the open access at publication time, because if they already provided open access to these tools, instruments at publication, this will be accessible and available for validate the conclusions of scientific publications. So here we are taking a step forward. What I presented before in the previous slides was that beneficiaries had to provide information about the tools, instruments needed to validate the conclusions of scientific publications. But here we go a step forward, but saying that not only information that has to be provided, but also the digital or physical access to those results in order to validate. So again, here the focus on reproducibility and on validation of results. And the third provision in the category of additional open science practices, where the call conditions impose additional open science obligations in case of a public emergency. And I think I don't need to state how important this is, given the current context. The beneficiaries must, if requested by the granting authority, immediately deposit any research output in a repository. So here we go to any research output, not only publications and data, we go beyond that, and provide open access to it under CC BY, public domain education, or equivalent. As an exception, if the access could be against the beneficiary's legitimate interest, they must grant non-exclusive licenses to legal entities that need the research output to address the public emergency. And this provision applies up to 4 years after the end of the action. So those are, let's say, the 3 pillars of the open science obligations that we have in the Model Grant Agreement: publications, research data, and these additional open science practices. But just to summarize the novelties in Horizon Europe, the rationale and scope, we are moving from open access to open science with a broadened scope of policy. The evaluation, the open science practices are evaluated under excellence, not impact. Practices beyond mandatory, beyond those that are included in the Model Grant Agreement or the work program or calls, are incentivized through the evaluation. They are taken into account in the evaluation, both mandatory and recommended open science practices. Past publications and data are expected to be open access already at evaluation stage. Publications evaluated on basis of a qualitative assessment provided and not the journal impact factor. Intellectual property rights, the requirement to maintain enough rights to meet the open access requirements to publications. Publications, we go from allowing embargo periods in Horizon 2020 to requesting immediate open access and to only reimbursing fees in full open access venues. Open access to research outputs is qualified through the requirement for specific licenses and standards for digital objects under fairness, in line with the FAIR principles, as well as the new concept of trusted repositories, which are those which are certified or that meet certain requirements. Research data management becomes mandatory for all projects, including data management plans. This will now be mandatory, it's an obligation per the Model Grant Agreement. The reproducibility of research, so the information that needs to be provided, and the access for validation of publications, and strengthen cases during public emergencies, as I just presented. So this is the summary of the novelties in Horizon Europe and the provisions that we have in the Model Grant Agreement. With regard to reporting, there will be a structured reporting of the requirements regarding open access and free text reporting of encouraged open science practices, those that are recommended. There will be a monitoring by project officers and reviewers in periodic reviews, and the monitoring of the framework program through key impact pathways. And here I included a link, but I guess you all know where to find those documents. The reference documents, so the legislation, the Horizon Europe regulation, the specific program, the work programs, the calls, the Model Grant Agreement. The annotated Model Grant Agreement will be available very soon, the templates, and also the guidance, the program guide that we are finalizing, with guidance and useful resources on open science practices and many other topics. But with regard to open science, in the program guide, we will provide resources and information with a focus on proposers, on how to prepare proposals and what information would be needed at that stage. If you have not attended and you are interested, I encourage you also to have a look at the webinars in which Open Science in Horizon Europe has been explained and the upcoming webinars. So there was a webinar on how to prepare a successful proposal in Horizon Europe in March. Open Science is that with as of minute 53. There are also very interesting Q&A, including Open Science. There was also a webinar on a successful proposal for Horizon Europe. Scientific technical excellence is key, but don't forget the other aspects, in which we also cover Open Science. That was run in April. And there are the Horizon Europe Info Days that will be coming. So there is, for example, on the 9th of July, the ERA and widening, in which we will mention the different topics in which Open Science will be part of the work program. And also in some of these info days, for example, in cluster 5, we will be there to present Open Science and the relevant provisions. And now I would like to present you Open Research Europe, which is the open access publishing platform for Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe beneficiaries. So it's a publishing service. ORE, Open Research Europe, is not a repository. It's a publishing platform for our beneficiaries for original articles which are stemming from Horizon 2020, funded research, and Horizon Europe. It covers all scientific areas of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. By publishing in this platform, our beneficiaries can provide immediate open access with the content licensed under open licenses, those that we require for our beneficiaries, which allow broad reuse of the publications. It provides open peer review. The open peer reviewer identities, publish the reviews, post-publication comments, so a lot of transparency also in the process. Each article has a dedicated metrics page, and it's super networked and mineable, text and data mining. PIDs, persistent identifiers, are provided, connection to repositories, open data and software, interoperable in technologies, preservation of content. Those are some of the characteristics of the Open Research Europe publishing platform. And what are the main assets of the Open Research Europe platform for our beneficiaries? That it's a high quality and reliable and efficient publishing venue for EU research. Swift, explicit, accessible, and transparent on business processes and publication policies. Oversight by an independent scientific advisory board. So swift and explicit and accessible and transparent are very important. It's, let's say, a little bit of an experiment for the European Commission to offer this publishing service for our beneficiaries. And of course, it had to have the characteristics that we believe publishing should have, providing this accessible and transparent way of evaluating research. But also this goes hand in hand with high quality and to be reliable and to generate trust and to gain the trust from our researchers, from the public also. And it's very important also to emphasize that trust is there and the oversight by this independent scientific advisory board. It's very hard, as we all know, to have a new publishing venue because we are fully aware of the pressure beneficiaries, researchers have in order to publish in some specific and usually high impact factor venues. So it's a process, but it is a trustworthy platform, very high quality, and it will be a process to gain this trust from the scientific community. It is at no cost to authors or beneficiaries, no administrative burden. It's a venue where grantees can also publish post-grant the results of their work while respecting their open access obligations, which is also very relevant because we get many questions about what about the post-grant publications and the fact that the Commission does not reimburse those post-grant publications. So our beneficiaries will have the opportunity of publishing here after the end of their project. And it's, of course, fully aligned with the Commission policy and principles. It takes the burden away from the researchers to check if a specific publishing venue, a journal or a platform, is compliant with the requirements that we ask them. So like this, they are certain and sure that this publishing venue allows them to comply with the open access requirements. But let me emphasize that absolutely there is no obligation on our beneficiaries to use it. And there will never be such an obligation. So we want to put the Open Research Europe publishing platform at the disposal. Our beneficiaries, it's already there. They can use it, but they are not obliged to publish in this venue. Here you can find a link to the Open Research Europe website, the Twitter account. They are very, very active. So this is run by F1000, and they are very active, providing tweets, information, frequently asked questions. So I really encourage you and the researchers to go and have a look to what is already published, the frequently asked questions, and to navigate a little bit all the information that is provided in there. Also, I would like to mention, I didn't include that in the slide, but I think it's good to mention that we are contributing to the development of a journal checker tool, that will help our beneficiaries identify which publishing venues allow them to comply with the Horizon Europe open access requirements. So, for example, I'm a researcher in a university. I can enter the name of the institution. I can enter that I'm a European a Horizon Europe beneficiary, and this journal checker tool will indicate, if I insert also the name of a journal in which I would like to publish, whether this journal, by publishing in there, I would be able to comply with the open access requirements. For example, it will flag, no, this is not a venue that will allow you to comply with the requirements because it requires an embargo period of 6 or 12 months. So this is not in line with our requirements, immediate open access, so that the journal checker tool will flag it. So that will be at the disposal also of our beneficiaries, but this is not a publishing platform or anything else. Open Research Europe is. The journal checker tool will just be a tool to check available publishing venues to ensure compliance with the Horizon Europe requirements. So thank you very much. I did a little bit of a shorter presentation because I would like to have some time for questions after so much information and all this bombarding of information. So if you have any questions, I would be very happy to take them.
Thank you, Alia, for this really nice and interesting presentation. Indeed, we are overwhelmed with questions, so we will try to answer as many as possible. So the first question comes from Angela Pepik. When you say the position in trusted depositories, what do you mean by trusted? Is there a list or some other criteria based on which you estimate whether the depository is trusted?
Yes, so that information will be provided in the annotated model grant agreement. And also in the program guide, we provide resources and examples. So those can be certified repositories or other repositories that meet specific characteristics. But I would say have a look at the model grant annotated model grant agreement when published, because there is information there, and also in the program guide about which are trusted repositories.
Okay. The next question is from Milishka Vivek Tobik. Can you elaborate on to explain expertise on open science? Can you elaborate more on this?
But I would say all those open science practices or others that they have done those open science practices, that they have been, I have participated in open peer review, I have some publications and I have open access to them, I have research data management, I have experience in research data management. So something that shows how they have been involved in those open science practices. So I think it can be quite broad. That is good because it allows for a wide range of expertise in those practices, how they were involved in those open science practices.
Okay. Another question from Joanna. Why is open access evaluated differently for ERC and EIC under impact?
So for the EIC, they decided not to include open science in the work program as part of the evaluation. So it's not taken into account for the ERC. And for the EIC, for now, it's under impact. That might change in the future. I'm afraid I cannot talk for them, for those that decided so for those work programs. But I can say that for the EIC, we expect that to change in the future and to be aligned with us. For the ERC, as you know, there is some independence in there. They have the open access obligations in the model grant agreement, which of course apply to them, immediate open access and funding of hybrids, so all those apply, but it's not part of the evaluation for the EIC. Sorry, I cannot provide much more info, but I would say it's their decision. So yes.
Okay. The next question is from Liz Winkel. Can you comment on DORA? Will the Commission work according to DORA?
So the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, of course, what we are doing now as a funder and in the evaluation is a way of integrating DORA, the Leiden Manifesto, so all those stakeholders' initiative manifesto to switch and to move away from the impact factor as the proxy for the evaluation of the excellence. We have not signed up per se to DORA. It would be great if we could, but let's see, we are doing what we can in order to integrate it in the evaluation as I presented, and also we are working as part of our open science remit and unit, other colleagues of mine, on research assessment with the stakeholders, with universities, with funders, on changing the research assessment system. So we are not a signatory of DORA, but we are doing what we can as a funder and by working with the stakeholders on the change of the research assessment system.
Okay. Next question from Michael. Are there any recommended databases for publishing research data?
This, I also have to say the information provided in the program guide in which we elaborate on each of the topics for open science practices, all those that I presented, the recommended and the mandatory, we provide information and resources for each of them. So I know I think it's not available yet, but it will soon be in our page, in the funding and tender portal, and please check there for all the resources.
How do the Horizon Results Platform and Open Research Europe work together, or how they differ?
Yes, the Horizon Europe Results Platform is not a publishing platform. So it shows the results platforms, but it's not a publishing venue. ORE, the Open Research Europe, it has peer review and is to publish publications, only publications, and it's a peer review publishing venue. Let's say it's like if we take a journal, a publishing venue. So one is a platform for results, and Open Research Europe is a peer review publishing platform. So it's different for publications.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Madalena. Will ORE be open also to publications of the associated partners which are not beneficiaries but contribute to the project without asking for EU funding?
This I would like to, I would have to check, but I would be very happy if you can share my email address and to get that question in writing. And like this, I can get back to, did you mention Elena? Magdalena? Sorry.
Madalena.
Madalena, so I would be very happy to get back to you via email. Mm-hmm. So if Andri, if you could share please my email with her, I would be very happy to get back to her.
Of course, of course. Another question, will there be any sanctions for projects, researchers that breach the demands of open access, open data, or still sign away the rights for publishing to a journal?
Yes, of course. So the open access obligations are obligations per the model grant agreement. So violations of those obligations are treated as violations or any other obligations, including the possibility of grant reduction. So we usually say that it's not because open science is something very, very nice that we try to say that is not serious. So it's an obligation. They have to comply with those, and they have to meet the requirements. Otherwise, the same provisions as the violations of the model grant agreement, apply.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Christina: is this journal checker tool linked somehow with the Sherpa Rome project?
They will use, yes, I could have also included, but maybe if you Google journal checker tool, there is already a beta version online, which has to be improved greatly. But I think they use information from the directory of Open Access Journal, the OAJ, the Open Access button. And I think that also integrates some part of Sherpa Rome to check which venues and under which conditions, because they have to check if it's immediate open access, if they allow for open licenses, but this is something done. And it's explained in the journal checker tool how they reach that conclusion about the publishing venue. Mm-hmm. But hopefully in the fall, it will be available for our beneficiaries. It's in the making, and also together with Coalition S, this alliance of research funders for full and immediate open access. So that checker tool will allow to check compliance with the plan's requirements and also with Horizon Europe requirements.
Okay. Is this journal tool already working? A question from Eliana.
It's a beta version, but we are working towards its improvement. So far, I would say you can have a look to see how it would look like, but not to check reliable information on publishing venues at this stage. That will come, hopefully in the fall, but we are working in it being better. But if you want already to have a look, it's journalcheckertool, I think, .org, and you can already see how it will look like. It will be very user-friendly: institution, funder, publishing venue. They just need to insert those three things, and it will say whether it's possible or not to comply with the Horizon Europe requirements.
Another question: could you please specify a bit more regarding the evaluation of the open science within ERC?
I'm not in a position, I'm afraid, with the ERC. I can only say that open science is not taken into account in the evaluation of proposals for the ERC. So this is the only thing I can say. It's not part of the evaluation of proposals for the ERC. Mm-hmm. So I think that is quite a lot not taken into account.
Another question from Eric: how can you know if a repository is trusted? Will there be a list, a set of criteria, or a seal stamp?
So I know there is not a white list, but we provide information on the characteristics they need to meet, and some examples. So, and then I would say now we are at the very initial stage of the implementation. So we have been working on the legal provisions, on the model grant agreement, now on the program guide, on the annotated grant agreement. So I guess more information will be available, but already there is information about trusted repositories in the program guide and in the annotated model grant agreement.
Okay. Another question: will it be available a list of hybrid open access journals where publication fees will not be eligible for funding?
So hybrid journals, I would say there is either DOAJ, that is the directory of open access journals, in which all journals are full open access. That is something they can check. So there are no hybrid journals in there. Or if not, the journal checker tool will serve that purpose. So we will not elaborate a list of hybrid journals, but the journal checker tool will identify hybrid journals. So if our beneficiaries check the journal checker tool, they will know whether it is a hybrid journal, and that will flag you can publish there, but you will not get reimbursed for the cost. Maybe they can check with their institutions or find alternative funding sources or a waiver from the publisher. So all that will be specified by the journal checker tool. So no list on hybrid journals, but they have the journal checker tool to check.
Another question from Christina: is there any limitation to the type of publications to be included in ORE?
So also there is a wide range of publications, but again, for the specificities, I would say check the Open Research Europe website, because I think it's very user-friendly with a lot of information. They define which type of articles, publications, and it's very well explained in there.
Mm-hmm. And I think we will take the last question from Paul. The journal impact factor will no longer be part of the evaluation. Instead, it will be based on quality assessment. Who will do this assessment? Will it be the evaluator's job as part of the evaluation?
Yes, so we would like these evaluators, and also that the proposers themselves explain the quality. They make it easy, this qualitative assessment of the research. So before, let's say, it was very easy to say, I've published here, high impact factor, it's excellent. No, we would like an effort to show why this research is excellent and to facilitate this qualitative assessment. So I think it's a concerted action and effort by all those, the funders, the evaluators, the proposers, to depart from the impact factor and taking for granted this is excellent research, and to show this, facilitate this qualitative assessment. So proposer and yes, the evaluators, we have to determine that. We will provide guidance on that. And this is a big step forward, also in line with DORA, Leiden Manifesto for research assessment, yes.
Okay, and I see that we have 1 minute. Let's answer one more question. When do you expect the publication of the annotated grant agreement?
I would say anytime soon. So at least some parts, I think the intention was to have pre-published some parts of the annotated model grant agreement. As you saw also with the model grant agreement that we had a draft published. And so I cannot say a date, and sometimes I don't want to say immediately because then it gets delayed because of internal processes, but I would really say very soon. So, yes.
Thank you very much, Alia. We managed to answer 18 questions. So
thank you for all the questions. It's very good to see you so active and so interested in the topic. So thank you very much, really, a real pleasure.
Joanna, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andri, and thank you very, very much, Alia. We've received very positive comments, so thank you for kicking us off with a very interesting presentation and for answering all the questions.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. So for everyone who asked, all the presentations in PDF format will be shared with you in a post-event email. So yeah, don't worry about that. Now it's time for our first break. We will take a 15-minute break until 10:15 Central European time. I've just posted again on the chat, maybe you saw it, the links to all the different working groups that we will go into now. You've already received these links as well via email, but this is just to be 100% sure you have the links. You may already try to join the working groups now if you like, and the hosts will let you in time for a punctual 10:15 a.m. Central European time start. So yeah, feel free to already head there. Maybe you grab a coffee or tea or any drink of your choice on the way. At the end, we will come back at 10:35 to this same webinar where we are right now. So you can use the same link that you joined this morning to join the webinar. And then Edwin, as mentioned before, will wrap this meeting up. And then we will have a networking session as well if you want to stay. You can attend any working group sessions that you want, switch between sessions. You have all the links. And just to remind you again that all the working groups will also be recorded so that when you put your video on, if you do, you might appear in the video. So enjoy your break. See you at 15:15 in the working group of your choice, and then at 11:35 here. Thank you for a great morning already.
So good morning to you all. Welcome back. Just before lunch, I would also like to have some words on today's meeting, and also to make sure that you do not forget that we have another meeting tomorrow. I hope you find it have had an interesting morning with all kinds of fantastic speakers. I will also take the opportunity to especially thank Andri, Johanna, the rest of Team Nick, and which actually by doing this kind of feels like family. The moderators for the different working groups like Virag, Mariah, and Christina for all their work. I enjoyed this morning very much, and I hope you did as well. We can go to the to have a kind of a social chat for those who want in the special link that you've got, and I would say that yeah, see you all tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of the day. Joanna, you want to put the link in the chat where people can go to?
Yes, I will put the link on the chat again for spatial chat. So everyone who is interested for some networking, feel free to come there. If you've never tried spatial chat before, I will explain when I arrive there how it works. So don't worry at all. It's a very fun networking tool that we also used during the conference. I've put the link now on the chat. You should be able to see it. So yeah, feel free to join us there just for a little bit, asking a little bit more questions if you like. Yeah, and I will welcome you there in just a second. But the room is already open, so you can move over there.
So I think we give the just a little more bit time for everybody to be able to either go to the social event or go to lunch, either way, and then we will close this session, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And from my side, also a big thank you to all the speakers and moderators in all the working groups. I've heard only positive feedback so far, so that's fantastic. I see people are arriving in special chat. Super. Okay. So, and see you all back here tomorrow. We will use the same link for the plenary sessions.